Northern Brewer takes you where homebrewing and craft brewing meet. From pro breweries to home breweries, we live and breathe beer. Craft beer celebrities, homebrew luminaries, brew sessions, and most important of all, lots of great beer. You are watching Brewing TV.
Welcome to Brewing TV. I'm your host, Michael Doss.
I'm your other host, Jay Keeler.
I'm Chip Walton.
Before we get started, guys, I want to give you a little Valentine's Day present.
Wrong holiday, dude.
What are you talking about? Valentine's Day is just right around the corner.
No, we're in St. Patrick's Day mode. All about stout.
Oh, that's right. So, okay, we're in stout mode. So let's brew up Dry Irish Stout from Northern Brewer.
Yeah, a modern version of the beer.
Sure.
Let's butt it up against a traditional version of the beer. A late 19th century Dublin Porter.
Cool.
Brew side by side. And
Then
I don't know.
I think we're going to have to come back here to taste both beers, then let the viewers at home decide which one they're brewing for St. Patrick's Day.
That's a good idea.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's do that. All for brew.
Brew for all.
Cheers.
Cheers. Let's go fix this problem here.
Fix it. Brew it. Because we care about accuracy, journalistic, brewalistic integrity, I'm going to correct a mistake I made before you even see it. In the segment which follows, I say the date 1860. This is incorrect. I wish to redact it right now.
Predact it.
Predact it. Predact it to 1880, which is the approximate actual date for the source of our Single Stout Porter recipe.
Whew, can we go get beer now?
Yeah,
All
let's do that. I feel a lot better. We now return you to the brew day, already in progress. 2 beers, 2 different centuries, same brew day.
What's the difference?
Let's talk about ingredients.
Okay.
We're using the same base malt for both beers.
What's our base malt?
British pale malt,
Okay.
Maris Otter. We're using about 40 to 50% more for the 1860 Single Stout
Okay.
because it's about 40 or 50% higher gravity.
Ooh.
It's a stronger beer. The yeast is going to be the same. This is a decanted starter of Y yeast 1084 Irish ale yeast. It's pretty mandatory for any black beer from Dublin. Talk about what's different. This is basically the Dry Irish Stout recipe from Northern Brewer. We're going to use flaked barley and roast barley in addition to the pale malt and the grist. It's a pretty classic formulation. The flakes are going to give it kind of a creamy texture and mouthfeel. The roast barley is going to give it that black color, the bitey, coffee-ish roast character. We use some fairly high alpha pellets. We're just after IBUs.
Right.
Variety isn't super important. You just want to hit fairly high 40-ish IBU level for a beer in the low 1040 OG. Going back in time to the 1860 Single Stout Porter, it was illegal in the UK to use unmalted grain.
Why is that?
Because England needed the malt tax. They taxed malt and required brewers to brew with only malted grains. So we've got no flaked barley in 1860. We've got no roast barley, which is also unmalted. Instead, we've got black malt for the roasted portion. That is malted before it's kilned to that nice black color. And this is kind of a twist. We're using amber malt.
Interesting.
Yeah, amber malt, if you want to taste it here, get an idea of what it's going to do to the finished beer. Because this is technically a porter. It was Guinness's porter recipe, a stout porter, kind of a higher gravity, beefier version of a regular porter. But so they used amber malt, which is pale malt, germinated, malted, and kilned without going through that stewing or steeping process to caramelize it.
Right.
So there's no sweetness.
It's just got a little tiny bit of roastiness to it.
Tiny bit of roastiness, the really kind of intense bready toastiness. It reminds me of like multigrain bread toasted almost to the point of being burned.
Yeah, exactly.
Finally, the hops for 1860 beer. Boom. We're going to use a lot of low alpha hops.
Okay.
The same blog that I extracted the grain bill percentages from, Shut Up About Barclay Perkins, which is a really great blog with lots of primary research on old and extinct beers from Europe, especially from the British Isles. But anyway, I also extracted the hopping rates. I'm taking some liberties with the variety. That wasn't specified in the old Guinness logs, but I'm going to use a similar hopping rate, scaled down to 5 gallons. I'm going to use a low alpha hop. These are Goldings.
Okay.
They smell really nice and resiny. There's 4.5 ounces of them, so it's quite pungent. And we're shooting for an IBU level of about 50. Should we get to it?
I think we should.
Boom!
Bam! Time to get out in the cold.
Stout.
You know, when I'm brewing on a cold winter day, I'm always looking for some duds to keep me warm while I'm brewing. Well, look no further. The new Northern Brewer pullover hoodie. It says Northern Brewer Homebrew Supply right here, and on the back, BAM! So we're gonna get at some all grain brewing over here today. So, if you're looking for something to keep you warm on a brew day, look no further. NorthernBrewer.com.
Our brewmaster says it's time to mash in. Have you met our brewmaster?
No, I haven't.
He's my friend. He says we're gonna strike at 162 for a mash rest for the Dry Irish Stout in the low 150s.
You know, rumor has it that iBrewmaster is soon to be coming out with an Android version.
What?
I'll be putting that on here as soon as it
Then
does.
you can have a friend too.
Yeah.
Just like me.
Hey.
One friend. You want to do the honors, Mr. Mash Paddle Hoodie?
Yeah. Where are we? Where's our grain? Let us do this.
All right.
Okay, so
Pretty straightforward single infusion mash.
this is the recipe that people are familiar with.
This is modern Guinness
Yep.
with flaked barley and unmalted roasted barley. That stuff wasn't used until the 20th century, but this is the way it is, the Guinness Draught. And we're going to put it on nitro, just like the Guinness Draught.
Nice.
Fairly low mash temp because we want good attenuation. This is a dry stout after all.
Now we're brewing up these 2 versions of the Irish Stout to have it ready for a very special day, right? What day would that be?
Wednesday.
Ow! Wednesday!
No, it's it's early in the year. We're getting ready for St. Patrick's Day. Everybody has stout on the brain on March 17th. I always try to have something Irish, preferably a stout, on tap for the occasion. I think we can call that good, Mr. Keeler. Thanks for stirring.
I'm taking a picture to capture the social media opportunity here. A steaming mash paddle.
Hey Jake, how can I follow you on Twitter? You and your steaming mash paddle.
I believe I am Jake Keeler BTV. It could be BTV Jake Keeler. Either one will work. Well, no, one of them will work. I don't know actually. Can't remember if it's BTV.
That's a cool story.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Another garage brew day. We got Risa, the German Shepherd, in the house. And we got Charlie P, aka Carlton P, in the nerd sweater. What up, nerd?
Nice thing to do on a stout brew day is to drink some stout. Chip, what have we got here for our downtime?
This is a chocolate stout I brewed just within the last month. I was kind of in a hurry to get it moved along, so instead of doing some cocoa nibbing or anything like that in secondary, I threw 5 ounces of baker's chocolate, unsweetened baker's chocolate, in at the beginning of the boil.
Okay.
And instead of throwing it in whole form, which I've done before, and I find it takes a while to figure out like if it's dissolved or not, I decided to throw these 5 cubes in a glass bowl, microwaved them for about 90 seconds, stirring them once in between. And it turned out looking kind of like you see here, kind of like frosting or a large batch of Hershey's syrup. I then mixed that with a little bit of the wort that was about to come to a boil, mixed it all together into one super solution of chocolatey wort-to-be goodness, and dumped it in. So essentially at 60 minutes, the chocolate went in, melted with my DME, and it was pretty awesome. And then from that point out, it was typical brew day. Handful of homegrown fuggles, and that's about it.
The chocolate comes through really well.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
nice and subtle.
It's like drinking a bittersweet chocolate bar.
Yeah.
And it meshes really well with the roasted notes. It's not a wimpy stout.
No.
It's got backbone.
I've felt like you, in the past, I've done some chocolate stouts, and you need to be really careful about the chocolate that you use, the flavoring, and then when you add it, you got to be really judicious about it. And I like I prefer the unsweetened chocolate. Yeah. Maybe cocoa nibs in the secondary, or like what you did, the unsweetened baker's chocolate in the boil.
Quality in, quality out, right?
I think so. I think so for sure. You shouldn't skimp on the chocolate that you use.
You said you found some of the flavor extract for chocolate can be a bit much. Like,
if you want, it's sweet on the sweet side. So if you want if you're looking for something that's like a dessert beer,
yeah, maybe
it's got that sweeter quality. Maybe that's what you want, but I just prefer the more bitter kind of like the more subtle kind of qualities of the chocolate.
This is really clean, Chip. What was the yeast?
Yeah, that's one breakaway for this beer from a typical stout. Usually you're using an Irish of some sort, or Ringwood maybe. This is California Common. This is the second half of the California Common yeast cake you saw Don Osborne toss into his IBL back in Lager Workaround. So
and this fermented pretty cold, right?
Yeah, my basement is about 57 right now. So
around 60 degrees.
Yeah, I just let it go.
Wow. And one of the things I really love about the style, the stouts, is that you can really take it in a lot of different directions. You could add cherries, you could add chocolate, you could make an oatmeal stout, you can make a milk stout. There's a lot of different things you can do. Imperial stout, so it's a very versatile style.
Yeah.
For sure. 10 Play-Doh, pre-boil gravity. Sorry, 10 bricks, pre-boil gravity, 1040.
Just a titch over 10.
So the Northern Brewer kit uses cluster for bittering, just a single charge at 60 minutes. Like I said before, we're just after IBUs, really. Just a nice complementary bitterness to the roasty quality of the grain. Ooh, that smells nice. It's kind of hard to tell in this light, but it's a lovely black color with garnet edges. And once it's fermented, get a little bit of estery, butterscotchy character from the Irish ale yeast. Put it on nitro. Mash in time. We got 9 pounds Maris Otter, 1 pound of amber, about 10 ounces of black malt. It's going in. We're aiming for a higher mash temperature here, Jake Keeler. Okay. We want some body on this brute. We want some dextrins. We want a little bit more on fermentable malt sugars to balance out all the hops. This smells a lot different than the other mash.
Yeah.
Much more biscuity, much less roasty. Every time I brew a stout, I ask myself, why don't I brew stout all the time? This smell is amazing. That roast, the grip plus the malt sugar.
Yeah.
Stout wort and porter wort too, to be fair.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite smells in the world.
Stouts and porters, I never think of those styles until the temperature drops below 40 degrees. And I'll grab, either brew my first or grab my first commercial bottle of stout. I'll drink it and I'll be like, it's a revelation. Every single year I go through the same process and I'm like, why am I not brewing this? Stouts of this, especially a dry Irish stout, it's clean, it's palatable, it's sessionable.
Do you ever get that? I don't like dark beer.
All
They're
the time.
too heavy. They're
All
too
the time.
strong.
Yeah. If there was one myth that in my lifetime, if I could destroy, particularly in America, is the light dark thing. I don't like dark beers. Like Guinness, it's just too heavy. Well, actually,
Guinness Draught is not
Guinness
heavy.
Draught is not heavy at all.
No.
So that just equating things in that dichotomous nature of just there's dark beers or there's light beers, and it just getting rid of that, I think, would be awesome.
Right, citizens. What you're seeing here is the Single Stout Porter heading into mash out. This has got quite an aroma on it. It's very, still stouty, portery. It's got that sweet, rich Maris Otter malt sugar sweetness. It's got the roastiness from the black malt, but then it's got a very strong, warm, grainy, toasty component from the amber malt. Chip smelled it and said, it's very bold. It's gonna be a bold beer. Having never tried it, I can't say for sure. This is my first time with this recipe, but I think bold is probably a pretty good descriptor. I'm really excited to try it. Stout porter, stout being in those days like mild, an adjective rather than a style in its own right. Beefier version, higher gravity, maybe a little higher hop rate of a porter. This was Guinness's Single Stout Porter. They just called it Single Stout. There was also Double Stout, Double Extra Stout, Foreign Stout, all kinds of grades on up the ladder. This is kind of like the entry version. 1060. It'll be bold. Right, so the dry stout, cooled in the fermenter, knocked out, loaded with yeast, overshot the gravity a little bit, ended up being a 1048 dry stout. I'll take it. This guy, same starting gravity, but we are starting out with a little bit more volume. It's at 1040 right now, and you'll recall we've got more volume to start out with because I know I'm gonna lose some work to these guys. 4.5 ounces of Goldings. This is a lot of hops to get these IBUs. You could use a smaller amount of higher alpha hops and lose less wort, but my own personal, strictly amateur interpretation of the hopping rates provided on Shut Up About Barclay Perkins suggest that a large quantity of hops and all of the tannins you'll get from this much vegetal matter is going to be an important component of the final profile of this beer. Looks like I'm gonna call that a boil, citizens. Are you ready for all this? Ready for this mess? Yeah, get in there. All of you. Yeah, Goldings definitely would have been around. I imagine a brewery as big as Guinness and some of the others that existed the last half of the 19th century would have used whatever they could get, more or less. I don't know exactly what higher alpha hops might have been available to them at the time, and I don't think they had any really good way of measuring alpha content in the hops. There's a little bit of guesswork going on, my own guesswork. No reflection on the data given on Shut Up About Barclay Perkins. Citing my source, owning up to the responsibility for however accurate or inaccurate this beer is going to taste. Side by side, Irish Stout, traditional, antique, Victorian, and modern. Aerated, pitched. I got some kettles to clean. We've got the Single Stout Porter, 1860, Dublin, 1060, lots of hops. We've got modern Dry Irish Stout, circa right now, all over the world, 1040-ish, not as many hops, still pretty bitter. These guys are gonna ferment. We're gonna turn them around in a few weeks, get together again, taste them side by side, and tell you what we taste. Till then, all for brew, brew for all. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Get ready.
Okay, citizens, here we are, Canoe Cam 2012, and we're gonna get kicked off with some stout on stout action.
That's hot. Let's do the Dry Irish Stout first. That's
Okay.
in your Brewing TV glass.
Very
This
handsome.
is, thank you. This is on the nitro, poured through a stout faucet on nitrogen. I'm gonna let you guys talk mostly about this one because I cannot be objective about dry stouts. It probably more than any other beer was the reason I got into beer. So I really love dry stouts on nitrogen. I used to spend a lot of money on the draft cans of Guinness, Murphy's, Beamish when you could get it. When a homebrewing friend of mine said to me, Dawson, make sure that you get whatever homebrewing equipment you want for the rest of your life before you get married, I made sure to buy a stout faucet. It's kind of like replicating part of your draft system to get the regulator for nitrogen and the stout faucet, but it wound up saving me a ton of money in the long run.
Smell is roasty, a little minerally.
I get a little fruit in there too.
Really?
Little butterscotchy almost. I get that a lot with the Y yeast 1084, the Irish Stout yeasts.
When you're pouring, it was just beautiful, right? I mean, the cascade itself, does it do much beyond just looking awesome for the first part of the pour?
That's the gas coming out of solution. So the nitro was developed to mimic the effects of cask beer, like beer on an engine, where you even maybe put it through a sparkler on the end of the swan neck and it just gets degassed and you're left with this sort of flattened, not totally flat, but it's not very effervescent either.
Yeah.
Beer with a really nice, creamy, dense head. It plays up the texture of the beer, like enhances all that creaminess that you build in with the flaked barley.
Yeah.
And it does much the same thing, kind of softens those harsh, sharp edges. That's what I think is genius about nitro with stout, particularly dry Irish stout, because it's got that really aggro, roasty, almost burnt, coffee-ish edge from a pretty high percentage of roast barley, and it just smooths that out. You get all of the coffee, but none of the astringency. It's like a really nice cup of espresso.
I was just going to say that. It's exactly what it's like. It's like a really good cup of espresso. We've been down this path before.
This can't end well. The other thing I found with nitro, like it plays equally well with extract and all grain beers.
Yep.
Just because this was an
Absolutely.
all grain beer doesn't give it kind of preferential treatment in the hands of the nitro and the stout.
No, I've brewed this beer before, the extract version.
And I've put extract beers on nitro before. And
Yeah.
similarly awesome effects. All right, so in your Northern Brewer and or Brain Oil pints, we have the 1880 Dublin Porter, the Sraid Dhasain, Single Stout, Sraid Dhasain, Dawson Street, the awesomest street in Dublin.
Tell them where you hail from.
County Donegal.
Instantly, by view, it's obviously not as dense
That
in
is
color.
jet black.
Yep.
This looks very porter, but still dark even for a porter.
You can really taste that black malt, the amber malt,
Yep.
and I think it's got it. You first taste it, it's edging towards that coffee character, the roasted character, and then it just stops
Yeah.
Yep.
at a certain point. It's almost like a hop bitterness. That's how it's playing out on the palate. Yeah, I find this to be a far more complex beer.
Yeah. I get the butterscotch from that 1084 yeast just a little bit more here, and it's almost like a slickness on the tongue rather than any flavor that can kind of shout through that bready, biscuity amber malt and the coffee, chocolate, black malt.
I was gonna say it reminds me of a true porter.
It is a porter, and I don't think that's an inaccurate thing to say. I mean, it was called a porter back in the day.
Yeah,
It was like a stout porter. And I think it kind of shows that pedigree.
When you go from the lineage of this beer to the Guinness to an American porter to a robust porter, a Baltic porter to a CDA, the one thing that they have in common is they're trying to achieve this bitterness. And this beer seems to achieve that bitterness, that hop character without the hops. There are brewing traditions and brewing techniques to achieve certain things within beer that I think people kind of just forget about. Like there are many different ways to skin a cat. There's many different ways to get a nice bitterness quality to a porter. It doesn't always have to be Summits and Warrior hops. Going back to these traditional recipes and giving them a try and just seeing like, wow, this is a phenomenal beer. This is a good beer. Good beer was consumed back in 1880. You know, and I think that people, when they look at craft beer right now and they look at home brewing, they kind of feel like, oh God, we're pioneering so much. And you're like, well, maybe, but maybe it's worth looking into the past to find your way forward.
So Jake Keeler votes 1880.
1880, I'm all about it.
1880.
I still love the modern dry Irish stout. I'm sorry, traditionalists. I like this too. Don't make me choose. This is like Sophie's Choice.
2-1, 1880 versus 2012.
We're going back in time.
Clearly, the past still has much to teach us.
It does.
Marty McFly, Al from Quantum Leap, they would tell you the same thing.
So, as you brew for this St. Patrick's Day, maybe you're going to brew a dry Irish stout in line with a Guinness.
I think you should. Put it on nitro.
But maybe give this recipe a try from 1880.
You should probably do that too. And then try them side by side.
A little bit of the past, a little bit of the present, to make a brighter future.
That's profound. That's beautiful.
You know, there's nothing else to say.
All for brew.
Brew for all.
Cheers,
Cheers,
guys.
On the next episode of Brewing TV, we're in Aurora, Colorado to visit Dry Dock Brewing Company. This highly awarded small brewery has made a big name for itself with its amazing beers and keeping close ties to the homebrew community. We visit with the fine folks at Dry Dock and put Dawson's Pro Series homebrewed versions up against Dry Dock's commercial beers. Brewing TV, episode 56, Dry Dock Brewing Company, posts online February 24th. Say something real quick, check.
Check, Canoe cam.
Canoe cam.
Do it again.
Get psyched! Got some brewskis, huh? Alright, well let me just go over here and get myself one. Oh, that cherry I detect, that's pretty good. Hey, you don't mind if I just stand here naked in front of you, do you?
I agree with you. I think hey man, there's gonna be a cut right here and then it's gonna jump to another. Good game.
Bet on the lucky one. Came in 18-1. I've got a feeling it's been years for me and you.